When you see someone as a threat to the weak, regardless of whether that's a CEO of a major corporation or a crazy person in the subway, you feel justified in committing a benevolent murder. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, educator in Los Angeles, bringing viewpoint diversity to everything in our culture. And today I'm going to be talking about vigilantism because there are two cases right now that are both involving vigilantes. Vigilantes would be people taking the law into their own hands for the law or justice into their own hands. And that would be the Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely case, and also the Brian Thompson and Luigi Mangione case. So I want to dive into both these and look where the similarities are and where the differences are. You know, like it's really interesting how people are siding with the killers. So the conservatives are siding with Daniel Penny, and the liberals are siding with Luigi Mangione. So I'm going to kind of break down each of these. If you're not aware, essentially, the first one would be Daniel Penny. So the case is essentially that people were on a subway in New York City, and a guy named Jordan Neely, who was acting erratic. He has a long history of violence and drug abuse. He was a Michael Jackson impersonator in New York, and he was acting in a way that was scaring people on the subway. There was no police officers in sight or anything. And Daniel Penny, who was a Marine, took him down, put a chokehold on him, and held it for, I believe, 6 minutes, crushed his neck, and killed him. And he was just found not guilty. And then the other case was of Brian Thompson, who was the CEO of one of the largest healthcare companies in the country, and he was shot, in cold blood on the streets of New York City. So, well, I guess just like starting with the Daniel Penny situation. A couple of things that I just want to point out is, as someone who's been practicing jiu-jitsu for a very, very long time, it was clear that Daniel Penny knew enough on how to apply a chokehold, but not enough to know like when to stop. Like just enough to do damage and not enough to not do damage. There's all these cases of jiu-jitsu black belts and things stopping criminals and not hurting them at all. I have my kids in jiu-jitsu as well. And one of the things that I say is jiu-jitsu allows you to stop violence with non-violence. You can completely control people's bodies. You can completely control their movements and their behaviors physically without actually hurting them. You don't have to hit them. You don't have to break their nose. You don't have to do anything. And Daniel Penny, you learn combatives in the Marines, but that's designed to kill people. It's not designed to subdue people. It's designed to kill people. And that's exactly what he did. And it's really interesting because there's a case here to say, well, what if Jordan Neely would have hurt one of the children on the subway and Daniel Penny stopped him? It's like, yeah, that's true. That's true. He stopped, the potential, hurt, injury, perhaps even death of innocent people. And Daniel Penny said, you know what? Someone's got to step up. Someone's going to stop this. It's going to be me. And we do want that mentality to some degree. We want someone who's going to step up and stop bad actors, so we don't just rely on the government to do it. Like we acknowledge that, but the way he did it was not ideal. If it was someone who was a jiu-jitsu black belt, he could have stopped Jordan Neely and not killed him, but he did kill him and found not guilty. One of the things that people on the political left are saying is like, this is going to lead to a lot of copycat people who are going to go out there, and anyone who's perceived as potentially being violent or hurting people, now you can essentially kill them. It sets that precedent. And I think that there's justification to that being dangerous. But the cylinder of this cylinder radio is this person was a threat. And a threat to the marginalized, a threat to the weak, he wasn't a threat to Daniel Penny, the 6'2" Marine or whatever he is. He was a threat to the elderly, the children, the weak, the women. And so Daniel Penny stepped up to stop him. So he was, doing good to stop someone who was a threat to the marginalized. But that's going to happen in the other case that I'm going to be discussing as well. We have to be careful of being pro-murder. And the people who are happy that Daniel Penny did what he did, I hope that you can at least acknowledge that it would have been better had he subdued Jordan Neely and not killed him. And the truth is that Jordan Neely was a product of the system that really let him down. You know, we don't have great law enforcement. Law enforcement can't be everywhere, but also he's had a tough life. You know, his mom was murdered, I believe. You know, drug abuse, drug addiction. I talked in a previous podcast about how drug addicts, you know, if you're from a marginalized community, then drug addicts have one pathway. If you're from a very wealthy community, then drug addicts have a completely different pathway in their life to get help. And he didn't get the help that he needed, clearly. And, you know, people were perceived as being threatened. And that's another thing. You know, I talk about offense all the time. Offense is completely subjective. And so is feeling threatened. Because I don't think Jocko Willink would have felt threatened by Jordan Neely, but a lot of people do. So is the justification that you can stop someone or kill someone just the perception of threat? Is that what it is? I mean, I don't know. Is it like, well, I'm scared, therefore I can do this act against this person? Or does it actually need to be something physical? Does it need to actually be a threat? You know, I'm in California, and what the police officers here tell me is like, if someone breaks into your house, you can't just kill them. You have to make it very known that you feel your life is in danger. But that is subjective. Is my life in danger? I don't know, but it feels like it is. So then I can use deadly force. And we have to be careful, because if you are an untrained vigilante, you know, Batman's trained. If you're an untrained vigilante, then you could go out and cause, you know, tremendous harm to someone who is a perceived threat when they might not be a threat. And you're going to stop them in a way that might use excessive force, excessive violence. And I think that's a real threat with what's going on here with the Daniel Penny case. And he was found not guilty. You know, so what does that mean? You know, are people going to maybe step up now? And will criminals have like, you know, it's kind of like in the towns in Texas and Georgia where everyone carries a gun. People are going to think twice. You know, in California, people assume that you don't have a gun in your house. So we'll break into houses because people don't have guns here. You know, there's an element of that if criminals go, I'm going to harass these people on a subway or in this situation. Well, because no one's going to step up, no one's going to do anything. You know, there's tons of cases like that too. There's cases of people being horribly abused, tons of them, horribly abused and beaten up and stuff. And there's people just sit around and they're just bystanders, just watching that, you know, like, you know, what's the quote about, you know, for injustice to happen, it's not just the people who are doing the injustice or committing the violence. It's the good people who do nothing. So we don't want good people to do nothing. We want good people to do something. And Daniel Penny stepped up. He's like, I'm going to be a good guy who's going to do something. Is that the ideal though? Is the doing something, is it murder? You know? And then if you compare that to the murder of Brian Thompson. So this guy, Luigi Mangione, you know, wrote on the shells, you know, the kind of mantra of how people are denied healthcare. You know, it's delay, deny, depose. Like, we're not going to give you healthcare, and that's a serious thing too. I mean, I just looked up. I think it's like 60% or more of people who are bankrupt in America are bankrupt because of medical bills. That's terrifying. That's not good. And there's so many stories of people who were denied coverage and their lives fell apart or they died because of that. And so it was justified for Luigi Mangione to say the guy who's at the helm of one of these companies who's denied coverage to all these people and led to sick kids dying and all that kind of stuff, he deserves to die. The same way that people said that Jordan Neely, this guy that's threatening children on a subway, deserves to die. And I think that the way that people are celebrating the death of Brian Thompson, a father of two, you know, because he is involved in one of these companies. Look, the job of a corporation is to raise shareholder value. That's their job. And he was doing his job. It's not to make people healthy. Same with pharmaceutical companies and stuff. They're not there to fix people. They're there to make money. So he was doing his job. You could say it's the banality of evil. You know, the Hannah Arendt concept. That's how the Holocaust happened. People were just doing their jobs. They were just keeping a train schedule. They weren't killing Jews. Well, you could go that route and say like, well, Brian Thompson is responsible for all of these because he has to raise the shareholder value. And then Luigi Mangione is justified in his murder. But just like the murder of Jordan Neely, I think we need to take a pause, guys, regardless of where you stand on these. Like, ideally, Jordan Neely would not be threatening people on a subway. Ideally, people would not be losing their coverage because of Brian Thompson's company. But we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in a utopia. These things do happen. We can't get behind murder. Crushing someone's larynx, shooting someone in cold blood. Like, we can't get behind that, even though it is gross. And I understand that both of these things are wrong. But if we open it up to celebrating murder as a society, I think that is going to have long-term repercussions, and it could lead to setting a precedent. What happens if Luigi Mangione gets off? He just gets a jury. They sow a narrative here, and he gets off. Now, every CEO in the country is going to be scared, justifiably. One thing that I thought was really interesting about this case is Luigi Mangione had a 3D printed gun. He shot someone with a suppressor on it. He had, what they call a silencer on the gun. And I haven't heard any calls at all about gun control. I mean, an innocent man, father of two, was killed, in the morning on the streets of New York City. And no one's saying like, well, this guy's got a gun. What about the guns of New York City? Which is interesting. When you use a gun for like your reasons, then it's okay. But the 3D printed gun concept is a whole different thing. It's almost like AI. It's like, we don't know where this is going to go, but now you can download the like instructions in the software to print out guns. There's no serial numbers, there's no registration. And now that's going to become a thing. 3D printers are going to get better and better and better. And people are going to be making their guns, which adds a whole new wrinkle to the whole gun control issue, which doesn't even seem to be a part of the conversation right now. We're talking about healthcare, which is good. Let's talk about healthcare. Maybe, look, if something good can happen from the murder of Brian Thompson, let's have a conversation about how we can do healthcare better. We can do healthcare better. We can. The way that healthcare works right now is it's in the market. It's a market. It's heavily regulated, but it is a market system. And insurance companies make money by you paying your insurance costs and them not paying out. So they're going to structure the whole business around getting payments and not giving payments. So they're going to do a whole bunch of things to do that. They're going to try and deny as much as they possibly can so that they can continue to be profitable and raise shareholder value. And insurance companies are the second most lobbied industry, just behind big pharma. And big pharma is not in the business of keeping people healthy. They're in the business of selling drugs. So the same thing with healthcare. They're not in the business of giving people healthcare so that they can be taken care of when they're sick. They're in the business of getting people to get healthcare so that they can pay their monthly or quarterly or yearly dues. That's their goal. So I think that there's a conversation to be had about healthcare, but the conversation about guns and about what are we going to do with 3D printed guns, because they're going to be everywhere and you can download those right offline. What are we going to do about 3D printed guns? I mean, that's a very serious conversation that we need to have too. And I think that the more gun regulations you can have, no gun regulation would have stopped Luigi Mangione. He had an illegal gun. That's that classic kind of cliche argument about gun control, is like, that's only going to affect the law-abiding citizens. It's not going to affect the people who don't want to follow the law anyway. Clearly, Luigi Mangione does not want to follow the law because he murdered someone on the street. So if he wants to murder someone on the street, he's going to do it. And I think that that's something that we absolutely need to discuss. Like the issue around healthcare. How involved was Luigi Mangione? Why didn't he devote his life to starting a healthcare company? How much did he really get involved to try and bring about change in the healthcare system as opposed to just murdering? It's a lot easier to murder someone than to start your own healthcare company and provide services to people who need it. That's the ideal. The ideal is to give a replacement that's better, not murder. Like, we need to get civically engaged. If you think the healthcare system is a problem, then get involved in the healthcare system and do something about it. That's what I, as a civics teacher, tell my students to do. Not go out and kill people who are kind of playing the game. Change the game. Change the game. That's what you do. You change the game. Well, that's really hard. I know it's hard, but positive change is hard. Negative change is easy. Think about how hard it is to build a house with masons and architects and contractors and drywall guys and electricians and all of that kind of stuff. But how hard is it to destroy a house? You need 3 big dudes with sledgehammers. So I think this connects with school shooters. I think that's what school shooters are doing. They're like, I don't matter in the world. They're all nihilistic. It doesn't even matter if I disappeared tomorrow, so I'm just going to kill myself. But if I kill myself and no one cares, that's even worse. So I want an impact on the world. I just want to make an impression on the world. I want to matter in the world. And when I've told my students, I'll say like, it's 1:15. By 1:30, 15 minutes, you could be known by millions of people for generations. For generations. You can be known by people for generations and millions of people in 15 minutes. How? Go out and do something absolutely horrific. Do something horrific. Their families will remember you forever, and you will make the news. You'll be on everyone's scroll. And that's what, Nicholas Cruz, who shot up Parkland High School, he was on his phone. He's like, my name's Nicholas Cruz. You don't know who I am, but you will. Like, he wanted to be known. He wanted to matter in the world. And when you do something horrific, you matter. It's like the kids who are ignored by their families, they get in trouble a lot in school because they have to go to the principal's office and their dad has to leave work to go pick them up at the principal's office and their dad's yelling at them. At least their dad is paying attention to them. It's the writer Elie Wiesel said the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So if you feel like the world is indifferent to you, then you're going to, make sure that the world knows you. And I think that that's kind of connected. Another thing that's kind of interesting would be the reality of where their backgrounds are. Because Brian Thompson was not from a wealthy family, but Luigi Mangione was. He's, wealthy family, private schools, all that stuff. Brian Thompson was not. So, there's a wrinkle here about class as well. And, someone who came from very little and rose up to be, a multimillionaire, that's something aligned with the American dream. I would love for Brian Thompson to have invented something that was good for everybody, a cool solar battery or something, but instead he was a CEO, but of a healthcare company. But it's an interesting when you go dive into their backgrounds as well. I think that we know so much. We know so much about Luigi Mangione already, but we know very little about the guy who Crooks, who tried to shoot Trump. We know very little about him. We know almost nothing about Stephen Paddock, the guy who did the biggest mass shooting in American history, who shot up Las Vegas, the Las Vegas shooter. We know almost nothing about him. We know almost nothing about Crooks, whatever, I forget his first name. Crooks, the guy who shot at Donald Trump. But we know all this stuff about Luigi Mangione all of a sudden. Maybe it's because he's good looking. He is a six pack and he's really charming looking and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's like when the Boston Bomber was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. It's like it's a better story to sell and it gets more clicks. But certain things, hit like the culture and it gets a lot of attention. I'm doing a podcast on it. It gets a lot of attention. Other things don't. But why? But just wrapping this up, I think that we have to really take a look at vigilantism and the double standard that we play because it supports our narrative. This is a viewpoint diversity podcast. And if you say that it's fine to kill someone who's a threat to people on a subway, but it's not fine to kill someone who's a threat to sick children, then what's going on here? Like, why? Why? Because the law says one is legal and one's not? Because healthcare companies are able to lobby to change laws to deny coverage to a kid with cancer or whatever it might be, or the other way around, of course, too. If you say it's not okay to shoot the CEO, but it's okay to kill, or it's okay to shoot the CEO, but it's not okay to kill Jordan Neely or vice versa, whatever I said, then you have to look at it as like, where is the similarities and where are the differences? And I know you can pick them out, whatever side you're on. You're like, well, this one's different because, look, every situation is always going to be different. But if you look at how your situation, the one you support, is different than the situation that you don't support, and vice versa for the other side, then you're going to miss an opportunity to find unity. And that's what we need to do as a country, is we need to find unity and say, both Luigi Mangione and Daniel Penny saw themselves as good. They saw themselves as protecting the vulnerable. And when you see yourselves as protecting the vulnerable, you do what you need to do. And then we're divided saying this person was protecting the vulnerable, but that person wasn't. They said Jordan Neely was the vulnerable. Sure. Jordan Neely, you could say that he was a victim. Absolutely. But you could also say the people on the subway were potential victims. The people that Jordan Neely injured in his past were absolutely victims. It's undeniable that Brian Thompson is a victim when he's shot in cold blood, but you could also say that the people that he denied coverage to were victims. You know, like a lot of critical race theory and critical social justice about the oppressor versus oppressed kind of way of seeing the world, the power struggle of the oppressor and the oppressed. You could say that Brian Thompson was the oppressor in the way he was dealing with things, but he's clearly the oppressed when he gets shot in the street and people are celebrating it. You could say that Jordan Neely is the oppressed because he's, in a tough situation. He's an addict. I don't know if he was homeless. He was, in a really tough spot. But you could also say that the people on the subway who are at the whims of this crazy guy acting erratically were the oppressed. And Jordan Neely threatening people with physical violence was the oppressor. So it all depends on how you look at it. And all I want to do is just call on you to challenge whatever it is. Whatever you think about Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely, Brian Thompson, Luigi Mangione, challenge it. Challenge it. And when you try to see things from the other side, you're going to understand it better. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm trying to get you to see that these things are complex. Where are these two cases similar? Where are they different? And how is the mindset that people have that support it, or the perpetrators who committed the crime, how was their mindset very, very similar? Because I believe that it was. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Share them with me, please. I think that there's an opportunity here to have some really important discussions moving forward as a country. Thank you so much for listening.